Oh, wow. Stephanie Ferrante, how would you go about having to cancel on a client? Yeah, that's a tough one. But again, for whatever reason, you have to cancel on a client. Personal emergency, world emergency, not enough time in the day, moral objection. No matter the reason, you're going to have an interaction with the client, and they're not going to be happy at the end of it. And it's difficult for people. It's difficult for us as humans, as empathetic beings, to be around someone who's pissed off or whose emotions about a matter are unsettled. And as empathetic people, we want to fill that space. We want to right that wrong. We want to mend that relationship. And if you have to cancel on a client, I mean, I think one of the first things that you need to do is make sure you know that you can't adjust how they feel at the end of that conversation. You have no control over that. And you've got to give up control over that. You're going to give them bad news, and they may yell, they may threaten you, they may take it with equanimity. But going into a difficult conversation like that, it is natural to want an outcome and desire a certain kind of outcome. It is important not to try and push the conversation to that outcome. That is not a useful use of your time. Adjusting the emotions of someone you're talking to is never going to be a winning strategy for life. And so you gotta prep that, like, telling them the truth, you gotta tear off that Band-Aid. You gotta tear off that Band-Aid. I have a funny one on this. Years and years ago, I knew someone who had had a difficult interaction with a client. And it was difficult enough that she was enraged about this difficult interaction. And she called the client's phone and she said, "Hey, I'd love you to call me. I'd like to talk about something." And then she hung up, and her husband was like, "Dude, you are really worked up about this." And she's like, "I totally am." And he's like, what are you afraid of about this conversation?" And she's like, "Well, I'm worried it'll go this way and that way." And he's like, "Well, do you want to workshop it with me? I'll be your client. And well, let's just start with you dumping kind of how you feel." And she was like, "Okay, look." And so they started workshopping this conversation, which is a fantastic exercise, by the way. And I love my friend's partner for giving her this opening. And they sat for like 15 minutes and workshopped this conversation over many different iterations. But it began with my friend dumping on her partner as the client and being like, "I can't believe you put me in this position." And she just said all the true things. Now, what she didn't know was that she hadn't fully hung up the phone, and that the client's answering machine recorded her entire workshopping of that conversation with her partner. She didn't know this until the client called her and said, "Hey, I've just gotten a really intense answering machine message, and I would like to talk to you about it." And it turned out amazingly. The client was a lovely human who heard everything in that call and really listened to it, and those two had an incredible interaction about it. This is not a piece of advice about how to deal with a difficult situation like that, but I love how that one turned out. Oh man, can you imagine? Oh, yeah. Righteous Robot. What is a professional way to say you might not hit your deadline? Oh man, that is tough news to deliver to a client. You got to call them right away. You got to call them the second you smell it. You can't even wait more than a few seconds. You got to call them the moment that the thought occurs to you that you might not hit the deadline. This is because it's mission critical. If you are going to not hit the deadline, it's time to immediately offer your clients some choices about the deadline, because I'm sure there are ways in which you could hit the deadline if certain things were eliminated from the gig. So this reminds me of a story of my very early days in the commercial film industry. I'm working for Jamie Heineman on a Toys R Us commercial, and we're doing 14 commercials in a single day, all of them with practical effects. just nightmarish and also spectacular. But one of the gags that we had built failed utterly the moment we brought it out. And we had like 2 hours to shoot this commercial or an hour to shoot this commercial. And the rig that had been built that was the centerpiece of this commercial, like shat the bed and was completely destroyed. And Jamie, it was Jamie's job, Jamie's gig. I was working for him. And I watched him go up to the director and be like, the rig has failed totally. And the director was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I'm really sorry. If you would like to get this commercial in the can today, here are 3 options. Option 1 takes an hour and gets you this. Option 2 takes 3 hours and gets you this. Option 3 takes a day and you get this tomorrow morning. Which one would you like? And they were like, oh, option 2, please. And Jim was like, great, and executed it. So whenever you are bringing a problem to a client or a supervisor, if you can, it is always good to come with a set of solutions they can choose from. That bounds the problem for them. That helps them see a way through. If you call them up and be like, I might not be able to make the deadline, my first question is, what? What? I hired you to do a specific thing. Shut up about not making a deadline. I need that thing by the deadline. I need you to do what you said you were going to do. And then you say, yeah, but circumstances, blah, blah, blah. There was a strike in Asia and I couldn't get the PVC pipe. Who knows what reasons you can't complete the job? The explanation is not as important as saying, it's not going to happen by Tuesday. Here are the options. A, B, C, D, choose one. Yeah, that's the way to tell your client you won't be delivering by the deadline. You offer them some solutions and some alternates. And you got to be ready the moment you're doing that you may be working for a bridge that is burning. You may really enrage that client and they get really salty with you and you still got to deliver that job and you better. And they may never hire you again. That's the thing you accepted when you took this work. That can happen too. But there's no percentage in fighting about it. Like, if they're really salty about it, but you can still deliver that job, then deliver it. Even if it's late, then deliver it. They don't hire you again, that's fine. We all have people in our past that think poorly of us. I do too. Totally have people in my past that think very poorly of me for all sorts of different reasons. But yeah. So there was this one time, oh my God, a very, very early job I was doing. I'm freelancing in theater in San Francisco. I think I found this, I can't even remember how this guy found me, but this guy was a professional party thrower. And so he threw parties like the Black and White Ball here in San Francisco. It wasn't those people, but it was like that kind of level. And he was doing a Christmas party and he wanted a bunch of Christmas stuff. So they wanted the opening of the party to be Dickens' A Christmas Carol, 8 feet high and 12 feet wide, a huge book. And I billed that job as a $500 build. An 8-foot high book, 12 feet wide, made of foam core and wood with paper and a Christmas Carol front sheet of the book. That is not enough money for that job. That is a $5,000 job if it's a heartbeat. It's like, that is an expensive thing. I didn't know how to build. I made 10 pieces of topiary that stood 6 feet high. The animals themselves were each about 3 feet high on planters. I think I charged $100 a piece for them. I didn't know how to bid back then. And so I'm done executing these topiaries and I've just finished this book. And together the two have made me, I think maybe like $1,500. And I don't see a path to completing the rest that I need to complete for this party for the money he's got and in the timeline. And so I call and I leave a message. I'm a week and a half into this job. I call and I leave a message. Hey man, listen, this is done, that's done. And I want to let you know for the other stuff, there's a possibility I might not be able to get it across the line by the date. So I was calling to say I might be late. I'm still 3 weeks out from the due date, so there's time to recover. But I want him to know that I'm not sure. His response to that was to put a stop payment on a check he had already given me that had already cleared my bank that I had already spent. because he had given me a deposit that was half this job, and I had spent it building these 3 things, these topiary in the book. And when I didn't think you could put a stop payment on a check that had already been cleared by the bank, that had already been spent for a week. But apparently, check law is absolutely bizarro world, and this is totally feasible. This guy canceled the check, my bank account emptied, I still had work to do for him, but he refused to take a call or return my call for 10 freaking days. I had, in that point in my life, never been that stressed. I started having trouble seeing. It turns out that's called an ocular migraine. I started meditating. That is literally the job that got me started with meditation, because I was like, I need to do some breathing exercises to deal with these monsters. And in the end, I delivered what I had to him, and he like joyfully handed me a check for that amount and then asked me if I could still deliver the rest of the contract. And I was like, no, I can't. I haven't bid enough. I've already lost money. Oh my God. He didn't respond to my calls for 10 days. And I had just, at this moment in time, this is like 1992, I had just moved in with my girlfriend at the time, ended up being my first wife. And I borrowed $1,500 from my girlfriend to put in my bank account so I wouldn't overdraft everything else. And I remember her going, I just want to just double check to make sure that this isn't going to be like a regular thing. It was this very funny way in which she was like, I'm giving this guy I just moved in with all this dough, and is he going to take all my money? Is this how this is going to go? And I was like, this is an outlier. I mean, and I was telling the truth. It was an outlier, but woo, one of the most stressful weeks of my ever-loving life. Actually, it was like 2 full weeks.
Thank you for watching that video. Are you as sick of the tosses to membership as I am? Good, because here's a brand new one that I recorded today, and it's nice and short. There are 3 tiers to tested membership, and they all offer awesome stuff. Find out about it by clicking the join link below. We'll see you there.